Why does one ordinary exchange get louder only after you are alone? The door closes, the hallway sound disappears, and there it is again. A half smile from earlier, a reply that landed too flat, one small pause at the elevator before someone looked away. Nothing openly went wrong. No argument, no accusation, no moment big enough to point to with certainty. But after a long day, certainty is not always what the mind waits for. Sometimes it starts with a blur, then keeps sharpening it in private. You are washing a cup, taking off your jacket, standing in a room that should feel quiet, and the scene keeps returning. Their face, your tone, the second where you could not tell what they meant. The question changes shape each time it comes back. Were they tired or were they annoyed? Was that smile polite or strained? Did you miss something everyone else would have noticed? This is the uneasy part. The exchange feels too small to explain, but too sticky to ignore. You may even feel silly for caring. But the reaction is not silly. It is what can happen when the day has already drained the part of you that usually lets things pass. By evening, the mind can become less generous with uncertainty. It stops holding the whole interaction at once and begins leaning on the one detail that felt unfinished. The half-smile becomes the center of the room. The flat reply starts sounding like a public story. The elevator pause begins to feel intentional, even if it may have been nothing more than tiredness, distraction, or silence between floors. That timing matters. The cycle usually does not grow while the full scene is still available. It grows later. When the room is gone, the other person is gone, and there is no new information coming in to soften the sharp edge. All that remains is the unclear cue, revisited under worse lighting. And that is where relief can begin. The feeling is real. The discomfort is real. The private retelling is real. But a real feeling is not the same thing as a finished conclusion. You are not weak for noticing the moment. You are not wrong for feeling unsettled by it. The mind may be trying to protect you by checking the uncertain part again and again. But before that private retelling becomes proof, there is one smaller question to ask first. What made that tiny cue start sounding so loud? That is why the next section stays with those ordinary seconds after the slip, when the room is still mostly quiet and your interpretation starts getting louder. By evening, one ordinary sentence can start behaving like evidence. The kitchen is half dark. A glass sits by the sink. The refrigerator hums in that low, steady way that only becomes noticeable when the rest of the house has gone quiet. Your phone is face up on the counter, bright enough to pull your eyes back even after you told yourself you were done looking. There is one message on the screen. It is not cruel. It is not dramatic. It may even be normal. But you read it once, then again, then a third time, slower, as if the tone might finally reveal itself if you stare long enough. And then the earlier moment begins to change. The conversation that seemed harmless at the time starts coming back with sharper edges. The way they answered feels flatter now. The small pause before they spoke feels less accidental. Their smile, which barely registered in the moment, now seems like something you were supposed to understand. Maybe they were tired. Maybe they were distracted. Maybe nothing was wrong at all. But after a long day, the mind does not always begin with the widest possibility. It begins with the one that explains the sting. First comes embarrassment. Why am I making this so important? Then confusion. Did I say it strangely? Did they pull back? Did I miss something everyone else would have noticed? This is where a normal interaction starts to feel private, not because the evidence is strong, but because the feeling is strong. The room is quiet, your energy is low, and the mind reaches back into the day looking for the moment when the discomfort began. One uncertain cue gets lifted out of the scene and held under a brighter light. The rest of the room disappears. The ordinary timing, the background noise, the fact that people answer quickly when they are busy, look away when they are thinking, sound flat when they are tired. Those details were there too, but they do not glow in memory the same way the uncomfortable detail does. That is the mismatch. The cue is real, but its size has changed. They may have paused. The message may have been short. Their tone may have been hard to read. But fatigue can make one cue feel like a hidden clue, and a hidden clue can start to feel like a judgment meant only for you. The first relief is not pretending the moment meant nothing. It is letting it stay incomplete. A single pause is not the whole conversation. A short reply is not the whole relationship. One tired memory is not the whole room. But when the mind forgets that, it begins doing something very convincing with very little evidence. It starts arranging the cue, the embarrassment, and the unanswered question into a case. That is why the next section can name the pattern clearly, instead of leaving it inside the flinch. The cycle usually begins when one small cue gets promoted into the whole truth. After a long day, the mind has less room to hold a whole interaction at once. It cannot easily keep the person's tired face, the noisy room, the rushed timing, the earlier kindness, and your own exhaustion in the same frame. So attention starts narrowing. It lands on the sharpest detail and treats that detail as the main story. That is attention bias in ordinary language. One cue gets extra weight. A pause feels meaningful. A short answer feels colder. A glance away feels like proof. The rest of the scene does not disappear exactly, but it becomes quieter. The mind keeps revisiting the one part that hurt, and slowly forgets all the neutral details around it. Then threat begins to feel closer than it really is. This is how tired attention builds a private courtroom. The mind calls one witness, plays one clip, and starts arguing from there. Maybe I sounded strange. Maybe they noticed. Maybe they think differently of me now. The body responds as if the room is still watching, even though the room is gone, and the other person may already be thinking about dinner or traffic or laundry, or their own awkward moment from 3 hours ago. The spotlight effect makes the case feel even stronger. From the inside, your discomfort feels visible. The heat in your face feels obvious. The sentence you wish you had said differently feels unforgettable. But other people are not watching your inner life with the same intensity you are feeling it. Most of the time, they are carrying their own private noise. Fear of being judged grows in that gap between unclear cues and imagined certainty. It is the mind scanning for judgment when the evidence has stayed unfinished. A neutral expression becomes possible disapproval. A delayed reply becomes possible rejection. A small awkwardness becomes a larger story about who you are. The mind is trying to keep you safe from social danger, but when the cues are vague, it may treat uncertainty as a public story. This is the softer, more accurate reframe. The feeling is real, but it is not automatically evidence. Your tension may be telling you that you are depleted. It may be telling you that the day has been too long, that your attention is narrowed, that your nervous system wants reassurance. But it is not the same as knowing what another person saw, thought, or remembered. Private tension is not the same thing as public attention. Once that difference becomes visible, the cycle loses some authority. The moment can still feel uncomfortable, but it no longer has to become a trial. And to see how quickly this happens in ordinary life, we only have to follow the mind through 3 small retellings: the text, the meeting, and the hallway. That is why the next section can prove it, inside one ordinary example. The private retelling usually begins with something too small to defend itself. A reply arrives after 2 hours. You had asked a normal question, and the answer is just, yeah. No period. No warmth. Nothing that clearly says annoyed, but nothing that clearly says fine either. By bedtime, the message has stopped being 4 letters and become a tone of voice. The mind removes the ordinary possibilities. Bad clue, crowded train, a hand full of groceries, someone else answering while tired. What remains is the bare screen, the delay, the missing punctuation. A neutral reply starts wearing the shape of rejection. Then there is the meeting. You make a quick joke while people are looking at the agenda. Usually, it would disappear into the room. This time, the laugh comes half a second late. One person smiles politely. Another keeps typing. Nobody reacts strongly enough to prove anything. But afterward, the private retelling crops the room until only the awkward second survives. It forgets the person who did smile. It forgets the deadlines, the coffee cups, the fact that everyone was half inside their own inbox. The pause becomes larger than the meeting it came from, and sometimes it is even quieter than that. A hallway greeting. Someone you know says, "Hey," but does not slow down. Their voice feels cooler than usual. Their eyes move past you too quickly. The day goes on, but that little exchange keeps reopening. Did they notice something? Did I sound strange yesterday? Are they upset with me? Each private retelling sharpens the coldness and softens everything around it. The phone already in their hand, the elevator closing, the rushed walk, the private problem they may have been carrying before you appeared. These examples matter because the mind is not making the whole thing up. Something did happen. The reply was brief. The joke did land unevenly. The greeting did feel different. That is why the cycle is convincing. It begins with a real detail, then gives that detail more authority than it deserves. After a long day, memory can become a rough editor. It does not preserve the full scene with equal weight. It cuts away the neutral evidence first, because neutral evidence is quiet. The uncomfortable part stays bright. That is the clip the mind keeps reaching for, as if watching it one more time will finally explain what it meant. If you know that feeling, there is nothing strange about you. Unclear social cues can pull the nervous system into self-monitoring, especially when you are already worn down. The mind tries to protect you by reviewing the moment, but review can start to feel like proof. The softer truth is that other people usually notice less than the feeling predicts. They are inside their own fatigue, their own timing, their own unfinished thoughts. What became a private cycle for you may have been a passing second for them. And right before that passing second turns into a conclusion, there is a small opening. The moment when the feeling is real, but the public story has not arrived yet. That is why the next section can turn the pattern into a usable move, instead of one more private rehearsal. Before the reply is sent, before the apology is typed, before the whole night becomes a case against you, there is usually one small second that still belongs to you. It may not feel dramatic. It might be your thumb hovering over the reply button. It might be the phone screen going dark in your hand, so your own reflection appears for a moment. It might be one breath taken in the hallway before you walk back into the room. But that tiny pause matters, because the cycle is strongest when feeling and conclusion collapse into one sentence. They sounded annoyed, so they must be upset with me. That is the moment to interrupt. Not to argue with yourself, not to force yourself to be calm, just to create a little space between the feeling and the public story. This is the usable second. The first move is simple. Interrupt the private retelling physically. Put the phone down face first. Look away from the message. Let the screen lock. Feel your hand on the edge of the counter. The mind is trying to finish the scene, but the body can quietly remind it that the scene has already ended. Then name what is actually happening. Not, "I ruined it." Not, "They hate me." Something smaller and more accurate. "I am revisiting an unclear moment while I am tired." That sentence does not erase the discomfort. It just stops the discomfort from pretending to be evidence. From there, widen the frame. Ask what else could explain this. Maybe the flat reply came from someone standing in line, carrying groceries, answering too quickly between two tasks. Maybe the strange pause in the meeting had nothing to do with the joke. Maybe the colder greeting in the hallway belonged to their long day, not yours. The point is not to invent a nicer story. The point is to remember there is more than one possible story. Then ask for evidence, gently. What evidence is missing? Did they actually say they were upset? Did anyone else react? Is there a second cue, or only the one your tired attention keeps enlarging? And maybe the most honest question of all, how tired am I right now? That last question often changes the whole shape of the moment. A long day does not make your feelings fake. It makes your mind more likely to treat uncertainty as danger, and one cue as the whole room. The relief gets lighter here without becoming simplistic. You are not foolish for noticing the cue. You are just allowed to notice the conditions under which it became so loud. And once the story shrinks, the moment can begin returning to its real size. One message, one pause, one expression, one unfinished clue. Not a public story, not a public judgment, just a human moment, seen through a tired mind, waiting to become ordinary again. From there, the final step is to notice how quickly the room has usually already moved on. After a long day, ordinary can start wearing the costume of meaning. The elevator pause, the half-smile, the answer that landed a little flat, may have been almost nothing from the outside. A person shifting their bag, a tired face trying to be polite, a voice running low, because the day had already spent most of it. But inside your own evening, with the kitchen light on and your coat still on the chair, that tiny cue can start asking to be solved. This is where the cycle gets convincing, not because it has better evidence, but because it arrives when you have less distance from your own feelings. Your attention narrows. The room fades. One expression becomes the whole story, and the spotlight feeling quietly adds pressure, making a private sting feel as if it must have been visible, obvious, shared. But private retelling is not proof. It is often protection. The mind returns to the scene because it wants to prevent the next uncomfortable moment, not because it has discovered the final meaning of this one. So the calmer ending is not to win the argument with yourself. It is to stop asking one tired moment to explain your worth, your likability, or your place in the room. Maybe the clue was awkward. Maybe it was unfinished. Maybe it belonged more to their day than to you. An unclear moment is allowed to stay unclear. The pause can be a pause again. The half-smile can be a half-smile again. The ordinary interaction can return to its ordinary size, without becoming a private judgment you have to carry into the night. The moment was a moment. It does not have to become a public story. The durable lens is simple. Private tension is not the same thing as public attention, and one steadier question can stop a feeling from becoming a harsh public story too quickly. Carry forward one calmer question. What actually happened, and what part of the story arrived from the feeling itself? That matters, because a smaller first interpretation gives the room a chance to stay human.